U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin held a big meeting at a snowy military base in Alaska. It was Putin's first visit to the U.S. in almost 20 years. Trump welcomed him warmly, calling the talk a 10 out of 10 success, but in reality, they didn't agree on anything major. They spoke for over 2.5 hours about stopping Russia's war in Ukraine. Trump pushed hard for a quick ceasefire and peace deal. Putin stuck to his demands. Russia wants to keep the land it took in Ukraine, like Crimea, and he wants NATO to stop growing eastward. Even during the meeting, Russian missiles hit Ukrainian cities, showing no real pause in the fighting. After the talks, they held a joint press conference. Trump looked a bit down and said, "There's no deal until there's a deal." He promised to call NATO leaders and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky soon. Putin smiled and warned Ukraine and Europe not to cause trouble. They hinted at ideas like land swaps, prisoner exchanges, and security for Ukraine without full NATO membership, but nothing was finalized. Trump didn't mention the severe consequences he had threatened if no deal happened, which gave Putin a win by looking strong without giving in. The world saw it as a missed chance. More talk, but the war goes on, with thousands dying and Europe still tense. This meeting wasn't just about Ukraine. It sent shockwaves to places like India, Ukraine itself, and NATO countries. Here's how it affects them in simple terms. Let's check out how it affects India. Stuck in the middle, waiting for trouble? India is left hanging after this no-deal meeting. Trump had warned that if no ceasefire happened, he might slap 25% taxes on goods from countries like India that buy cheap Russian oil. India gets over 40% of its oil from Russia, saving billions and keeping prices low for everyday people. But now, Trump delayed any punishments for 2 to 3 weeks, saying he'll think more. This gives India short-term relief, but it's still walking a tightrope. India needs Russia for cheap energy and weapons to defend against China, while also teaming up with the U.S. in groups like Quad to balance power in Asia. If talks between Trump and Putin fail completely, India could face higher U.S. taxes, making things more expensive at home, like fuel and food, and hurting trade. India's economy is growing fast, but inflation is already a problem. On the plus side, if U.S.-Russia ties warm up a bit, it might ease sanctions on Russia, helping India's deals. India's leaders are staying neutral, trying to talk to both sides, but this limbo makes planning hard. For Indian people, it means watching prices and hoping for peace that keeps costs down. What does it mean for Ukraine? More pain, no end in sight? Ukraine is the hardest hit by this failed meeting. The war drags on with no break. Trump wanted a fast peace, but Putin wouldn't agree to pull back troops or stop attacks. Missiles kept falling on Ukrainian cities even as they talked, killing more people and destroying homes. Trump hinted at pushing Ukraine to give up some land for peace, and he's set to meet Zelensky in Washington soon to talk about it. But Zelensky says no way to losing territory, calling it a betrayal. For Ukrainians, this means more suffering. Over hundreds of thousands dead, cities in ruins, and an economy wrecked. No deal lets Russia keep pushing in areas like Donbass, wearing Ukraine down. On the bright side, Trump might send more weapons or tighten sanctions if Putin stays stubborn, giving Ukraine a fighting chance. But right now, it's a grim wait. Families separated, refugees fleeing, and fear of winter blackouts from damaged power plants. The meeting raised hopes but dashed them, leaving Ukraine feeling alone against a bigger enemy. How it affects NATO countries. Worried but united, for now. NATO countries like France, Germany, the UK, Poland, and others are breathing easier but still on edge. Trump called leaders like France's Macron, the UK's Starmer, Germany's Merz, Italy's Meloni, Poland's Naraki, and Finland's Stubb right after, sharing what happened and keeping them in the loop. No deal means the war continues, bringing higher energy costs, more refugees, and fear of Russian attacks spreading to places like the Baltic states or Poland. Putin's demands to limit NATO growth directly threaten the group, making Eastern members nervous. Trump didn't announce any big punishments for Russia, which avoids splitting NATO, but shows his deal-making style might favor quick fixes over strong support for Ukraine. If Trump gets too friendly with Putin, it could weaken U.S. ties to Europe, forcing NATO to spend more on its own defenses. For people in NATO countries, this means higher taxes for military aid, worries about gas prices in winter, and debates over sending more weapons. But the meeting united them to push harder. Experts say NATO should ramp up help to Ukraine to force Russia to talk seriously. Overall, it's a wake-up call. Peace is far off, and Europe must stay strong together.